on self-replicating code and quines. And one example that he uses is actually from molecular biology. I mean, if you have DNA, I mean, generally it's going to contain bits that are used for replication. But sometimes, though, it also even contains bits that aren't used for replication. So the way that it works is you have things called exons, which are the bits that are expressed, and you have things called introns that are actually also self-replicated, for example, in the DNA when it's being replicated. But it also carries along these extra exons along with it, and those just kind of hang along for the ride. But you can actually change the values of those things without affecting the reproductive capabilities of, in this case, the DNA itself. And it turns out that with quines and with the self-reproducing code, you can actually do exactly the same thing with these introns. And what we discovered is that introns are also the perfect place to put a payload. So this all sounds really esoteric, and it is, but we actually implemented an example of a quine virus. This particular one uses MySQL. This is it. Basically, yes, this thing really does self-replicate. I invite all of you guys to go fire up MySQL, type this thing in. It really will come out exactly as it's typed in. But the point is, if you take a look at it, though, you can also see in the intron portion, there's a payload again. And here you can see now a server-side include that says execute command regedit. You know, we didn't want to just discriminate against one platform. So if you're running Apache on Windows, this fully shows some of the possibilities you can do with this kind of quine virus. So this has a lot more generality, but the disadvantage, of course, is it requires a few more bits. So in this case, it required a 2K bit tag instead of a 1K bit tag. But once again, you can order those cheaply from DigiKey, and even 2K bits is still, it's still really low cost. So basically, we're just doing experiments with okay, we'll infect different databases and kind of do a bit of a roundup of actually what works on what. And these were actually some of the conclusions that we made. Basically, the buffer overflows, I mean, they mainly target the RFID readers. In terms of the SQL injections, those worked pretty much across the board on every database platform. Things like the self-referential commands for the viruses, that actually only worked in things like Oracle, and then still with the administrative commands. But the quines worked actually on pretty much every platform that we tried. I put a little C, next to the slide here just to show that, well, C was supposed to mean contactless smart card, but if you call a 2K bit tag a contactless smart card, yeah, I mean, essentially, considering that tags are getting bigger, you have more than enough bits for this kind of stuff, actually. And then same thing with the payloads. I mean, the SQL payloads are going to work on any database, basically. The server side includes and the cross-site scripting and things you would want to insert like that, of course, requires the management interface to work. And system commands only work on certain things like a SQL Server and the management interface, and of course the reader, like when you're doing the buffer overflows. So, all right, so how do you stop RFID malware? This is stuff that you guys probably already know already. Sanitize your input, do error and bounds checking, disable unnecessary facilities, segregate users and servers. I know this is familiar. Use parameter binding. This is a specific one against SQL injection. Do code review, to try and find the bugs. Limit your permissions. Okay, and this is stuff that's completely obvious. All of us know this. But it turns out that a lot of the RFID companies didn't know this, or did know this and sort of tried to downplay the effects of what actually was happening with this malware. I mean, essentially, I did this work. I actually published this work about 4.5 months ago in Italy at a conference called IEEE PERCOM, and I wasn't expecting that there was going to be a huge reaction to the paper. I was expecting there was going to be some, but it was basically within the 24 hours after the paper was published. I think I got about 200 emails. I mean, it was the reporters were calling off the hook. But the thing was, it was the very first few reporters that talked to us got the story right. I mean, the first person who released the story was John Markoff from the New York Times, and also a Dutch journalist from the Volkskrant, and they got the story right. But the point is, it's like with reporters, it's like the telephone game, you know? Because they don't necessarily all write their own stories. They just sort of, you know, copy a little bit from another story, you know, slap it in there, change a little bit of it, you know, then the next reporter does the same. Eventually you wind up with something that is absolutely, completely unlike anything you started with. So it was sort of like by day two, you were getting these reports of like, you know, a quote, you know, from me, which of course I didn't say, but like, you know, that I could bring down the entire RFID world in 24 hours with RFID viruses. I mean, they were completely blowing it out of proportion about what it could do. And just generally spreading a whole lot of misinformation about this stuff. They like the whole cat thing. I actually titled the paper, "Is Your Cat Infected with a Computer Virus?" And a lot of people had fun with that. You can see actually the picture on the left was from, I think Liz McIntyre from Caspian, who's one of the big anti-RFID groups. And also the one over there, they came up with a little picture for F-Secure antivirus for cats. So, but the point is, I mean, this is all like fun and everything, but then the RFID industry started getting worried. And I guess they were getting, you know, some calls from their customers saying, you know, hey, what's going on here? Is this actually safe? And they started putting out these press releases basically saying, you know, these attacks will never work in the real world. This requires programming that is so inept and stupid that it is unrealistic to think that this will ever happen. And yeah, I mean, especially Kevin Ashton from Thing Magic was putting out these absolutely brilliant quotes about. I mean, not only just that, but he was actually also even trying to discredit us as a group. And one thing that he did, in one of his articles, one of his interviews, he called us the three Dutch kids, which is pretty funny because my boss, he's Andy Tannenbaum, if any of you guys know who Minix is. It's like he's young at heart, but and also the ironic part is the three of us aren't even Dutch. So. But the point is, the entire like next 2 weeks, they basically were frantically putting out these press releases, trying to discredit the work. I was, you know, it took me a few days to try and decide whether or not this was going to hurt my feelings or not. Eventually, I just said, oh, screw it, you know. But now, I mean, it's sort of like after the backlash has died down, people have been starting to get really a more, I would say, a balanced view on this. I mean, the point is, this is just one more thing to think about. Yes, it's going to be harder if you have things like read-only tags. Then you can only use them as vectors, but you can't use them for self-replication. EPC tags, they only have 96 bits. It's true, you cannot put one of the self-replicating RFID viruses, as I designed it, onto one of those tags. But that doesn't say that one of the brilliant hackers that's out in Vegas right now isn't going to go and figure out a way to do that next week. I can't predict that. And yeah, and I mean, another thing is like tags that use crypto. They were asking about things like contactless smart cards. Will this work with contactless smart cards? And it probably depends on who's doing the attack. Because if a card, for example, has to authenticate itself to a system, you could still do an insider attack. If, for example, you have, let's say, you know, a passport, and you're essentially, you know, bringing it to the airport, who's to say that a disgruntled airline employee who has access to the machine that has all the keys isn't going to go and rewrite it? And then, of course, when you check the certificates and everything, it's all going to check out. So, I mean, all of these things are obstacles, but they don't make it impossible. And that's really like the take-home message that I wanted to make with this presentation. And that, yes, sometimes it requires insider knowledge. Yes, sometimes there are conditions where it makes it harder. It will not work with all tags. It is not going to, you know, furry cats are not going to bring down Las Vegas. Don't believe everything you read. But also just that this is one more thing to think about. RFID, you know, is just another technology. It's extending the network perimeter. It's just another form of data, just like a USB stick, just like a floppy drive, and you need to distrust the data just as much as you distrust data on anything else. That's it. Thank you.